When Ellen stormed into the house clutching an ashtray and hurled it at her son's chest, he knew, today, everything would collapse. Not just another family argument, the kind that leaves faint scratches on old photo albums. No. Today, the wall holding them together for 20 years came crashing down. "You don't even know who you really are," she hissed, trembling with rage. Her voice, usually soft, wrapped in the quiet comfort of worn wool, suddenly turned sharp as a blade. Chris stepped back. The ashtray thudded onto the carpet, spilling old, yellowed photographs with creased corners. He didn't smoke. Never had. But the ashtray had sat on the mantel as long as he could remember. Now, shattered on the floor, it revealed its true purpose, not for ash, but for truth. "What did you just say?" he asked, but he already knew the answer. Deep inside, in a corner he'd never dared to explore, something snapped taut like a pulled string. He just didn't want to hear it. Not now. Not from her. But Ellen wasn't stopping. "You're not my son," she whispered. "And you never were." The house on Hickory Street fell silent, like a wounded animal holding its breath. The old oak floor groaned under Chris's feet as he walked toward the kitchen, as if warning him, "Don't go further." But he couldn't turn back now. Only one question spun in his mind. Why? Ellen stood at the sink, back turned, staring out the window. Beyond the glass, autumn bled across the yard, trees in crimson and gold, puddles from the morning rain, and empty swings swaying gently in the wind. She didn't turn, but Chris knew. She was waiting. "How old are you?" she asked, suddenly quiet. 38. "And how old am I?" He paused. 63. "And in all 38 years, you never once asked why you have blue eyes when mine and your father's, Jim's, were brown?" Chris clenched his fists. Jim. His father. Dead for 15 years now. A gentle man who fixed bicycles for neighborhood kids and always smelled of cigars and motor oil. Chris couldn't imagine him lying. Couldn't imagine Ellen keeping a secret like this, one that shattered everything. "Did you adopt me?" he asked, forcing his voice steady. "No," she said, finally turning. Tears pooled in her eyes, not pity, but pain. "You're my nephew. My sister Laura's son." Chris staggered, bracing himself against the countertop. "Laura? You had a sister?" "I did," she said bitterly. "She died giving birth to you." He closed his eyes. All his life, he'd felt a quiet unease, as if he didn't quite belong. Now he knew why. "You were born at 37 weeks, in August 1987, Ellen continued. "I took you from the hospital and told everyone you were mine." Jim agreed. He was kind to the bone. "And I couldn't. I couldn't bear to see you sent to foster care. I couldn't lose anyone else." "Why did you keep it secret?" He whispered. "Because you were mine. Because I was afraid that if you found out, you'd leave. And I couldn't lose another soul." He looked at her, the silver-streaked woman in a wrinkled sweater, her hands aged from decades of washing his clothes, packing his lunches, stroking his hair when he was sick, and his heart tore in two. He wanted to rage. To shout, "How could you?" But instead, he asked, "What happened to Laura?" Ellen drew a deep breath. She was young. Just 22. Studying to be a nurse. She fell for the wrong man. He ran when he learned she was pregnant. She didn't want an abortion. She said, "This is my baby. I'm keeping him." Then, complications set in. The birth went badly. She died an hour after you were born. Chris shut his eyes. The missing piece of his life finally clicked into place. "She had the same eyes as you," Ellen added softly. "Every time I looked at you, I saw her. It hurt, but it also comforted me." The day stretched like old rubber. Chris couldn't focus. He wandered the house like a stranger. His childhood room, nearly untouched by Ellen, books on shelves, school awards on the wall, an old baseball in the corner, now felt like a stage set. He sat on the bed, pulled out his phone, and typed a name into the search bar. Laura Ellen Harper. Almost no results. Just a brief obituary from 1987 in the local paper. He clicked, and his heart stopped. Laura Ellen Harper, age 22, passed away on August 18, 1987, at St. Luke's Medical Center. She leaves behind a newborn son, Christopher Laura Harper. Funeral services will be held. He read the father's name, Michael DeVero, a name he'd never heard before. Did you find it? Ellen asked from the doorway. Chris nodded. Is he alive? I don't know, she said. I tried to find him after Laura died. He left town, changed his number, vanished. And then, I just stopped looking. I was terrified he'd try to take you from me. But he's my father, Chris said, and in his voice was not anger, not blame, but longing. Ellen fell silent. Do you want to find him? She finally asked. I have to, Chris replied. The next week passed in a fever of searching. He called old records, scoured archives, even hired a private investigator. And then, a week later, the call came. Michael DeVero is alive, the investigator said. He lives in Phoenix. Works as an accountant. He's married. Has 2 kids, a son and a daughter, both teenagers. Chris felt a knot tighten in his chest. Does he know I exist? No record of it. But I found something interesting. In 1990, he filed a request with the city archives for the birth record of a child born to Laura Harper. So he knew. Or at least tried to find out. Chris booked the next flight. Phoenix greeted him with dry heat and a relentless wind. Michael DeVero's house stood in a quiet suburb, white paint, neat lawn, an American flag on the porch. Chris stood at the gate for 10 minutes before pressing the doorbell. A man in his early 60s opened the door, gray at the temples, upright posture, warm eyes. When he saw Chris, he froze. Can I help you? He asked, but his voice already trembled with recognition. My name is Chris Harper, Chris said. I'm Laura's son. Michael went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Then he stepped back and gestured him inside. They sat in the kitchen. Coffee. Silence. The hum of the refrigerator. I thought you were dead, Michael finally choked out. After Laura. I tried to find you. But they told me the baby didn't survive. No, Chris said. I lived. My Aunt Ellen raised me. Michael covered his face. His shoulders shook. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, son. Chris didn't know what to say. He felt no hatred, only a strange, heavy emptiness and relief. He wasn't nobody. He was someone's son. Just a different one. Why did you leave? He asked. I was young. Scared. 25 years old. I didn't know how to be a father. And after Laura died, I couldn't bear to look at you. I thought you'd be a constant reminder of her and my cowardice. But you still looked for me. Every year on the anniversary of her death, I lit a candle at church, Michael said. And every year, I prayed for you even though I didn't know if you were alive. Chris returned home 3 days later. Ellen waited for him on the porch. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged him tightly, desperately, like she had when he was a baby. You're still my son, she whispered. And you'll always be my mother, he replied. A week later, Chris arranged a meeting. At a small cafe on the edge of town, 3 people sat at one table, Ellen, Michael, and him. Awkward. Tense. But honest. I don't want to lose either of you, Chris said. You're both my parents. Just in different ways. Ellen took his hand. Michael nodded, fighting back tears. They talked for hours about Laura, about how she laughed, how she dreamed of becoming a nurse, how she loved old war movies. For the first time, Chris felt he was touching his roots, not symbolically, but truly. 3 months passed. Chris still lived in the old house on Hickory Street, but now visited Michael every weekend. Michael's kids, his half-siblings, were wary at first, but slowly warmed up. Sometimes they even joked, now we've got 3 dads, Jim, you, and you. And Ellen? Ellen began writing her memoirs. So you'll know how much we loved you, she said. And one day, flipping through an album, she showed him a photo, young Laura, laughing, holding an ultrasound image. That's you, she said. Before you were even Chris. He nodded. And for the first time, he didn't feel torn, only connected. By a thread thin, but unbreakable, stretching through time, through pain, through lies and love. Because family isn't just blood. It's choice. And sometimes, forgiveness. Sometimes, truth. A story about a lie born of love, one that shattered everything and somehow held it all together.